Axel Merk is the founder and CEO of Merk Investments. Merk Investments manages about $1.1 billion in gold and gold mining investments. Merk created the first US-based physical gold exchange-traded fund with a patented process to facilitate delivery to investors in gold in either coins or bars. Axel Merk is a sought-after speaker and author on topics ranging from the economy, currencies, precious metals, sustainable wealth, and personal finance. So welcome to have you here. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this Saba Capital situation. And they're attempting to take control of ASA Gold and Precious Metals Limited. Explain what is going on there. They filed a shareholder lawsuit. And what would be the broader implications for the precious metals industry if this would happen?
Yes. How many hours do we have?
As concise as possible.
ASA is a nicely traded closed-end fund that's been around since 1958. And it's unique in that most closed-end funds are fixed income products. We invest in the mining sector, in gold mining companies, notably in fairly illiquid junior mining companies. And like many closed-end funds, ASA trades at a discount most of the time. And Saba has decided they want to, quote unquote, close the discount. Unfortunately, Saba has not engaged with us to learn about the unique aspects of ASA. And they accumulated shares. And at some point, without engaging, they said, we haven't done our job. Why don't we replace the directors? And so at that stage, the board decided that let's slow things down. And we have to ask shareholders of what they want in general, not just one shareholder.
So this is an activist investor, basically. Yes. I mean, how do you deal with that? What is the board's role when something like this comes up?
Well, the board represents all shareholders. And this board, even before I came on the board and before Merk Investments started managing this fund in 2019, has always sought the input from investors. We have an active outreach with Saba. We reached out about a year ago after we saw them show up in their filings. And so we try to solicit their input, and then the board has to decide on what's the right thing for the fund. And the board believes that if they want to do certain things, like a tender offer, well, we have to explain what the implications are, because when you have over 70% in illiquid stocks and a requirement to have 20% in US custody, which is a unique feature of our fund, where you tend to have the more liquid stocks, you can't have a tender offer without investors potentially front-running a sale and causing a lot of havoc. And so one needs to be more nuanced. And the board's responsibility is to look at the entire context, also in the context of the viability of the fund in the long run. If investors want liquidation, which is, for example, one way to theoretically at least get the NAV. And I say theoretically because in the liquidation scenario, you also have the problem that you need to liquidate illiquid securities. So that's a drawn out process. And we believe that the current board is best suited to do that. We happen to think that most investors like to invest in the gold mining space. Now, there are clearly different types of investors. Some like to trade the discount, or Saba likes to do its own thing. But that is part of the reason we're going to shareholders, ask them a few things to confirm the mandate that they actually like to invest in this fund. Because ultimately, what we do in this fund, we do because you can do this in a closed-end fund. In an open-end product, you couldn't do the sort of things we do. You couldn't do the same sort of investments.
Yeah. So you're taking the issue to the shareholders, to all shareholders. Where does that stand? Is there a vote, or how does that work?
Yes, there is an annual shareholder meeting, April 26, and we are asking shareholders to support us and send a clear message to Saba that they want the fund to invest in the gold mining space, and they support the current board.
Yeah. I mean, is there ever any, role for an activist investor that can be positive for a company?
Well, some of it is, of course, in the eye of the beholder. As an activist, their mission is, as they say, to close a discount. They buy discount assets, try to get the NAV. And if this were a very large fund with lots of liquid assets and it was trading at a significant discount, then they may have a valid argument. Now, a lot of activists think, oh, it's okay if this fund at some point isn't tenable anymore, you just create a new one. Well, not so easy, because this one was created in 1958. Very unique circumstance in the time. You couldn't invest in gold in the US. This fund actually was incorporated in South Africa, reincorporated Bermuda, acts in the US with a special exemptive order, has a whole kinds of unique facets to it. You couldn't just recreate it. Also, converting this to a fixed income fund is not practical. There are much more cost-effective ways to run a fixed income product. And at the same time, we think most investors like this fund because it allows investors to access the junior mining space, which is very difficult to do otherwise in the public product.
Right, not very many junior miners are traded publicly.
Well, they're traded in Canada, but they're very illiquid. And if you look at the open-end space, mutual funds have liquidity requirements. So yes, they can, but as the very long bear market last decade showed, is when they have outflows, they have to sell the liquid stuff, and then their portfolio characteristics change. Whereas with a closed-end fund, we can really be with those companies in the long run and enable investors to have the unique risk profile that that fund provides.
So let's talk a little bit. You're a closed-end fund. What are the advantages to that and how you operate in particular versus becoming an open fund?
Yes. Well, first of all, this fund we don't think can be converted to an open-end fund. And if one tried, it would be hugely expensive because of the unique characteristics of this fund. But what it allows us to do is we participate a lot in funding rounds for junior mining companies. And we have some private investments as well. It's a very illiquid space. These companies have periodic need for financing. We help to institutionalize these assets so that in future funding rounds, to the extent that these companies are successful, bigger players can participate. And there is the potential for disproportionate gain. And that unique risk profile and opportunity profile, of course, as well, is not accessible in the open-end space. And so we think that this is a way to allow the broad investor base to participate in that. And we think that most investors in the fund actually really like that.
Okay. And then finally, let's just talk about gold and silver market a little bit because it's been very interesting lately. We've seen gold hit record highs. And what's your take on the precious metals? Why are we seeing them generate so much interest? And where do you think things go from here?
Well, I like to tell people gold doesn't change. It's the world around it that changes. Gold is the same thing as 100 or 1,000 years ago. We have different types of investors buy. Foreign central banks have been a very active participant. US policies has encouraged hostile nations to reduce their treasury holdings. And it's not like they're gold bugs, but they don't have so many alternatives, and gold is one of the beneficiaries. Gold has historically served as a diversifier. In 2022, not so much, but in most years, it has. And then the one investor, and of course the typical investor is the one who's concerned about the purchasing power of the dollar. The one investor we have not seen much of late is the speculator. Those have gone to the meme stocks and the Mac 7, whatever you may want to call it. They might come back if there's ever a strong move up or down, but for the time being, the speculator isn't as much.
Well, that's interesting that speculators are not involved because that almost tells you there's more upside to come.
We happen to think so.
Yeah, at least historically.
Yeah. The bigger potential we see is in the gradual transitioning of the Federal Reserve into an easier environment. And actually, the worse the economy does, the better these sort of stocks will do. They're, by the way, very volatile. So with just a little bit of investment, you can get a lot of diversification. But if the S&P 500 doesn't do well, people look for more diversification, and that's when a fund like ours is attractive. Yes.
Well, very interesting. Thank you so much, Axel.
My pleasure.
Thanks.